Hello and welcome back to the Azure DevOps course. In this lecture, we will create two environments that will be linked to two AKS Kubernetes cluster namespaces, one for the shopping front-end STG namespace and one for the shopping front-end prod namespace. If you remember, in the classic pipelines, we have created an AKS cluster and created two namespaces and deployed to them using the classic release pipeline. We had the shopping front-end STG for our application staging environment and shopping front-end dashboard namespace for the application prod environment. So we will create two environments and link them to these two namespaces. So I will start creating the first one, the STG environment. I will name it with the namespace name shopping front-end STG. I will copy it and paste here. It will be a Kubernetes resource environment. Next, so now it will create the service connection to authenticate with the AKS cluster namespace. Here we choose the namespace. It will be shopping front-end -stg. It's the existing namespace. I choose it. So when I validate and create, it will create a service connection and authenticate with the Kubernetes cluster namespace. Create. So it's created now. I will open the access to the pipelines, the security, open access. Okay, and now I will create the shopping front-end prod environment. New environment, prod, and link it with the Kubernetes namespace. Create. So now the prod environment is created. I will open the access for the pipelines. Okay. So now we have created the two environments, the shopping front-end prod environment and the shopping front-end STG environment. So now what we will do, we will create two stages in the YAML pipeline that will use these two environments to deploy to the Kubernetes cluster namespaces. If you remember, in the classic pipelines section, if you click on releases, we have created a release pipeline, the AKS release. This release pipeline has two stages, the STG and the prod, and it deploys to the both STG namespace and the prod namespace in the AKS cluster. So what we'll do, we'll convert this classic release pipeline into two stages in our YAML pipeline. So let's go to the YAML pipeline. So we have created a YAML pipeline which is called .NET Core CI/CD. Now this pipeline has only the CI stage, this CI build stage. We want to add two stages for the prod and the staging. So now I have created two stages, the deploy to STG stage and deploy to prod stage. These two stages will have deployment jobs. The first one, deploy to STG deployment job, and the second one, deploy to prod deployment job. And each deployment job will be linked to an environment. So here, the deploy to STG will link it to the shopping front-end STG environment. So I will turn back to the environments. That is the environment name. So now this is the environment name. To make this deployment job authenticate with the Kubernetes namespace, to make it consume the service connection of the environment, we must type dot and the resource name. So that is the environment name and that is the resource name here. That is the resource name. So I will copy the resource name. I made the both with the same name. And also in the production, it is the same, but instead of STG, it is prod. So that is the environment name, and that is the resource name. The resource name is the namespace name. That is the resource name. So we must do this so we can use the service connection of this environment. Okay. So if you remember in the AKS release pipeline, if we're turning back to it, here in the tasks, in the STG task, we used a task group. This task group. So this task group contains the tasks that will run to deploy to the AKS. So I will see the task group and copy the tasks from it. We'll use the same tasks, the replace token, the build and push, and the Helm upgrade. So I'll view the YAML and copy it. And here in the steps, I will put the task. But here it is giving an error. I will click on the task setting. So the task format is not written correctly. So I will use the task assistant here. I click on setting and click add. That will fix the format. So now it is fixed. It changes the task name. So okay. And I will copy it also in the prod stage. Okay. The second one is the Docker build and push. I will click on view YAML and copy the task. And come here and copy. Okay, but here I will change something. Here instead of using the build context for the Docker file path, we must use in the YAML pipeline, we must use the Dockerfile input. That is the path here. So we will copy this artifact folder and put it here before the Dockerfile. So that will be the path. We will change the task here in the YAML pipeline. We must change it to use the Dockerfile input. That is for the Dockerfile path. And click on add. So now we have added the build and push Docker task. I will copy it also in the prod stage. Okay. And now the last thing is the Helm deploy task. I will go into task group and copy the YAML task. Okay. And put it here under the Docker task. So now we don't need the Azure subscription or the resource group or the Kubernetes cluster. All these inputs, we don't need them because the stage will consume the service connection of the environment. We have defined the environment here in the job. So we don't need to put any authentication inputs like the Azure subscription or the resource group or the cluster. We don't need all these inputs. We will delete them. We only need the namespace and the chart path and the release name. These values. So that is the inputs that we will need. I will copy this task also in the prod stage. Okay. So now you see we are using variables like artifact folder variable, image tag variable, the namespace and the release name. We are using these 4 variables in our stages. So that is not the only variables that we need. There is also the variables of the appsetting.json, the token pattern that we used in our appsetting.json. If we go to the repo, the shopping front-end app, we use here this token pattern and we use the replace token to replace this token pattern. So we need a page title variable to be available so we can make the replacement. And also in the Helm chart, in the values, we use the token pattern for the replica count and for the ingress host. So we need these variables to be available so we make the replacement. So in the classic release pipeline, we were linking the stages with variable groups. There was a variable group for the STG and variable group for the prod. So we'll use the same variable groups, the STG and prod. And these 4 variables, the artifact folder and the image tag and the namespace and the release name, we will add them to the variable groups. So now I will go to both the STG and the prod variable groups and add these 4 variables, the artifact folder, the image ID, the namespace and the release name. Because they were given as input for the task group, but now we are not using the task group, so must give them in a variable group or put it hard-coded. So I now prefer to use the variable groups. So I will go to the STG and the prod variable groups and add the variables. Here I will add first the namespace. It will be shopping front-end -stg and the release name. It will be the same, shopping front-end -stg. And the image tag, if you remember, it was stg dash. If we return back to the release pipeline, here the image tag was stg dash the build ID variable. Okay, the only thing that is missing is the artifact folder. The variable name was artifact folder. The artifact folder, if we return back to our pipeline build summary for the artifacts, I will go to technical CI/CD build summary artifacts. So here the artifact folder is drop, and drop has shopping front-end folder. So I will write here in the artifact folder variable, the pipeline workspace variable /drop, the artifact name /shopping front-end, the path of our artifact. That is the artifact folder variable value. So now we can save the front-end STG variable group and do the same for the prod variable group. Namespace shopping front-end -prod. The release name is the same. Image tag prod -build ID. And last thing, the artifact folder, it will be the same artifact folder variable. So now we can save and use these 2 variable groups in our pipeline. Return back to the pipeline. We can go here in the deploy to STG stage and write variables key, and under it we can use group and write here the variable group name. The variable group name is front-end -stg. I will copy it. And here for the prod, we'll do the same. Can copy it. I copied it. Front-end -prod variable group. So now we are ready. We can validate and save and run the pipeline to deploy to the 2 environment resources, the front-end -stg namespace and the shopping front-end -prod namespace. We can now validate and save. But there is a last thing I want to do. I want to make a pre-check approval for the prod environment. I will go here in the prod environment and add an approval. a pre-check approval. So a user must approve for the deployment to continue. It will be paused until I approve, and I will create the pre-check approvers for the prod environment. Okay, so now I will try and run the .NET Core CI/CD pipeline. We have 3 stages: the .NET Core CI, and deploy to STG, and deploy to prod. And now the deployment to the STG environment has been done successfully, but the deployment to prod is waiting for my approval. So I will click on review and approve, so it can continue the deployment to the prod environment. So now it is deploying to the prod after my approval. So now the deployment to production environment has finished, and the pipeline run has finished successfully. So if we return back to the environment and click on the shopping front-end STG environment, and click on the resources in the shopping front-end STG Kubernetes cluster namespace resource, click on it. So now from the powerful features of the environments, when linking it with a Kubernetes cluster, you can view your workloads and services like you are in a Kubernetes GUI. So here in the workloads, it shows you the deployment, shopping front-end -stg-deb. That is our deployment name. That is its labels. That is the replica set name. And that is our image name. It's with the tag stg-251, the build ID. That is the container registry and the container repo. So, and that is the number of pods, 1 pod, and the time it created. So now we can view and analyze the Kubernetes cluster workloads. If we click on it also, we can see the pod. That's the pod name. It's a status. The status is running. So we have a full GUI for our Kubernetes cluster in namespace. And if I click on the pod, I can see its node name, its image, its labels, its status, and I can see the logs of the pod. Here you can see the logs. So you can see if the pod is running well. And I also can click on YAML and see the pod YAML file. So it's a very strong feature of Azure DevOps environment. We can also see the services. That's our cluster IP service, and see the pods that is linked to this service. So we can analyze and view all of our namespace workloads and services. So it's very, very strong feature, and it will help you a lot. So we can see the workloads of the STG and the prod environment. So now to access the shopping front-end STG pod and the shopping front-end prod pod, we use the ingress. So if I return to the Azure portal, here in the ingresses, we have 2 ingresses, the STG ingress and the prod ingress. So to access this ingress, we must map the ingress host to the ingress load balancer IP. So I will create 2 DNS records in my local DNS hosts file that has the shopping front STG and the shopping front end prod mapped to the ingress load balancer IP. So I will open the hosts file and add the 2 DNS records. So now I have wrote the 2 DNS records, the shopping front end stg.local and shopping front end prod local, mapped to the ingress load balancer IP. I wrote the 2 DNS records in the hosts file, that is the local DNS hosts file, and now I will save. If I return back to the Azure portal, if I try to go to this URL, the STG, now it opened our shopping front end .NET Core app in the staging environment, the page title for the staging environment. And if I click on the prod URL, now it opens the shopping front end .NET Core app in the prod environment, that is the page title of the prod environment. So that's the end of this lecture. We have created 2 stages to deploy to AKS cluster environments, one for the shopping front end STG environment namespace and one for the shopping front end prod environment namespace. So that was the last lecture in the YAML pipeline section. I hope you like it, and see you in the next lecture.